Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever from SMB Nation. I'm Ken Dwight, the virus doctor, and we have Michael Jenkin too. We've kicked Harry out today. So between the two of us, we have a palace coup going, and we'll figure out something to talk about for the next little bit. So Michael, welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you are in the world and what's going on where you are.
Hi from Australia. Hey, yeah, there's a bit of a hostile coup today. We've taken over. We can do what we want to do. And so you've got the virus doctor and I guess a bit of a malware hunter here today. So you're going to hear some stuff all about malware, viruses, what's current out there. I'm from Australia. Don't hold that against me. Beautiful place. You just can't visit. COVID-19 restricts everybody in and out. And I'm sure you've got the same problems where you are. So let's get down to it today and let's have a bit of a discussion. And Harry, I guess we'll have to watch this a bit later and see what jokes we told about him, but we won't do that. So over to you, Ken.
Well, as you know, there are always new developments to talk about in the whole malware and internet security field. It happens I've been dealing with a few of those myself and for my clients since you and I last talked, most recently a ransomware infection. And that brought up several recent developments that I had not heard of other mention of. This happened to be a Dharma ransomware, which of course is a very common strain. What I didn't realize is how much more common it has become recently, and how this is now the new domain of what used to be called the script kiddies. A lot of people are using ransomware as a service in the form of Dharma who really don't know very much. And in fact, this particular episode of it, there were some things that were not in the ransomware provider's best interest. And so it was, the good news for the client is that we have completely recovered. And to be completely honest about it, that's partly because they did have good offsite online cloud-based backups. And there have been decryptors for different strains of the Karma ransomware. We didn't get as far as trying to see whether there was a decryptor for this particular one, but it's been around since 2016. So 4 years now that we know of, and there have been multiple strains and free decryptors for various strains of the Dharma ransomware, also known as Crysis, C-R-Y-S-I-S. So one of the things that I think when I say it was not in the ransomware purveyor's best interest, this is the first one I've seen that actually encrypted some executable files. Some EXEs and DLLs were encrypted with the same suffix on them. And so one of the symptoms that the client saw was they weren't able to run Chrome anymore or QuickBooks. So Michael, how about you? Have you seen others where something other than data files, usually the executables have been immune since they would keep the client from being able to need their data anyway?
Well, that's right. If you make the operating system not run, or if you make Word not work, how can you check your file that's been encrypted to know you've been encrypted, therefore get alerted and pay your ransom? So it's a bit sort of counterproductive. But I have to agree, I'm seeing exactly the same thing here. I'm seeing a lot of ransom now with different extensions, .8 for example, all sorts of different things that when you drill down on it are all related to Dharma. I have also heard and a bit of poking around on the Tor network and have seen that there are people offering kits at fairly cheap prices to roll your own ransomware. So the reality is people out there who are mischievous are able to collect, let's say, a couple of thousand valid email addresses, use those valid email addresses to barter to get stolen credit cards, to use those stolen credit cards to then pay for malware as a service. And then they just type in what email address they want the Bitcoin to go to, do they have a target in mind, and how malicious do you want to be, and send it on its way. It's so easy that I think Script Kiddie is a little bit more intelligent than some of these people have to be to do these things. And yet Script Kiddie's always been the whole denomination of that person who doesn't know much about programming and just whack something together. It's gotten so simple. There's a menu system to choose what you want to do, who you want to target, and where the money goes. It's so simple. And a lot of these ransomwares now have things like help desks and things like that in the back end to help you pay your ransom. So they're getting very sophisticated, but with very little knowledge of what they're actually doing. And that's a little scary. A lot of these ransomwares out there in the past have been backdoors, there have been ways to decrypt them and things like that. But now that people are kind of divorced from the actual programming of the ransomware, They have no idea what the code does. They have no idea. There's backdoors, who knows? Who actually wrote it, who knows? It came from somewhere on that evil place, the dark web. And we're seeing a lot of that. We are exactly what you're seeing. I don't think there's any difference between countries now because the internet has made us milliseconds away from each other. If something spreads there, it's spreading here. So we're seeing the same thing.
Yeah. Not only that, as you mentioned, they're getting less sophisticated. The bar is a lot lower now. The concept of ransomware as a service, or what we would refer to as a franchise operation, has actually been around for a few years. Some of the early ransomware developers did also offer their code and offer basically affiliate programs. But in the early ones, it was a pretty steep cost of entry. The ones I heard about were on the neighborhood of $5,000 up front, and then a percentage of the actual revenue generated from ransom payments. Now, there's some there with a zero upfront cost. And of course, there's an offsetting higher percentage, but even so, if somebody just jumps in and doesn't have any skin in the game, then they don't really care. Along with that,
That's right.
one of the things that I think works to the disadvantage of the franchisor, in effect, in that scenario, is the reliability and the technical ability of the franchisee. And this really depends on the original creator of the ransomware and how diligent they're going to be in enforcing for lack of a better term, the quality standards. Because if the word gets around that, well, with Dharma, if you pay the ransom, you still won't get your data back, then their cash flow would slow down considerably. And so I suspect that some of them are going to be very diligent and require their franchisees or their affiliates to be as helpful as possible and even refer back. In fact, some of them, I assume, will refer any support type calls to the mothership and ensure that they can get their data files back. One thing I don't know about this particular one is what the actual ransom demand was going to be. It was one of them, like most these days, they don't tell you in the ransom note. They say, send an email to this address and we'll tell you the details. But I suspect that most of these are a much lower ransomware demand, more of a spray and pray campaign, where it's a nominal amount, nominal meaning maybe a few $1,000s, surely more than a few hundred, which is what the earlier ones were, but nothing on the order of the millions of dollars. And as you probably know, there have been two publicized cases in the last few weeks of large organizations that actually had a $10 million ransom demand. And two of them, well, the two that we know of, the $10 million demand, both paid. We don't know exactly how much, but it's suspected that one of them was about half of that. They actually paid $4.5 or $5 million, and the other was along the same lines. So you're talking about two different grades of ransomware out there and sophistication level of the people that are actually producing it.
Yeah, and look, the other comment I got to make on that, looking at how much ransomware is out there and the variants and how it's getting into systems and all the rest of it, I would suggest at the moment, for at least my experience here in Australia, we've moved to 100% not paying ransoms and 100% coming back off backups. Now, I don't know if that's because the message is finally getting out there. People are realizing, do your backups, test them again, do some DR testing, make sure it all works, and get all your data back. I don't know if that's what it is, but I think message is getting out there. And for those that haven't got the message yet, make sure you've got good, reliable backups. Quite often, I've actually seen some stuff get decrypted that's not functional afterwards. It gets destroyed in the process. There might have been that the file was halfway through being saved as it was encrypted. Who knows what happened to it? But in the end of the day, you don't get your data back even when you pay for the decryption. So people are starting to get a bit wiser and I think save a bit of pocket money. They're making the investment in better backup solutions, which do cost up front. But long term, this is the way to escape ransomware. Yes, you can train people. Yes, you can put software in place. You can put fancy firewalls in place. But the problem is the hackers and crackers are always finding a new way to get in. It might be social engineering or something like that. So think about the worst. The worst is, okay, my data's gone. I can't afford the ransom. But then think about, where is my backup? How current is my backup? Can I recover my backup? And if need be, can I recover it to a different system while the one I've got is getting some forensics done on it? Think about these things, because the downtime of mucking around, even just paying a ransom, is too long. the recovery time from all of the systems that are out there now is very quick. Business continuity planning, disaster recovery planning, awesome. Chuck your backups in there, make sure you check them and verify they work. Excuse me.
And I have no quarrel with what you're saying, except in the reality, at least in the U.S., the percentage of organizations, even large, well-funded organizations that don't have backups or that don't protect their backups, is still incredible. I'd say well over 50%. The other aspect, as you know, one of the more recent developments with the whole ransomware scene is that they actually have a two-pronged approach. One is to get your data back. If you have good backups and say, well, take a hike, we don't need you, then the new threat is disclosure. Because in most cases now, especially the more sophisticated ones and the ones that are on a higher dollar basis, before they ever encrypt the data, they exfiltrate it. They have original unencrypted copies of all of your data files, some of which may contain sensitive information, may require disclosure, which here again, we all know that a very small percentage of the actual ransomware, successful ransomware attacks are reported or disclosed. And in the States, there are severe penalties for not reporting a disclosure. And so just the threat of exposure is another way that the bad guys have of getting the victim to pay up, even if they don't need to pay to get their data back, if they can restore from backups. So as you say, they're always innovating and learning new ways to monetize their efforts.
That's right. And throughout Europe, there's pretty strict data privacy laws as well. And here in Australia as well. I can only speak from my own sort of background here, but businesses here are up for millions of dollars worth of fines. They need to report the slightest bit of data leak. So that means everyone's reactionary now. If they get a ransomware, they just have to assume, yep, there's possibly a data leak. And as soon as that happens, of course, they have to report to the authorities, and then they have to show that they've done everything in their power to protect from that data leak and to patch it going forward, which in itself does cost money. And then you have to call in forensics experts to look over your network and make sure you're safe. And that causes downtime and more money. So you don't really want to be in that situation, but that is where it's headed. You can obviously insure yourself against a lot of these things, but now insurance premiums here in Australia, at least, have quadrupled in price. Cyber insurance, and I'll give you Australian figures. You have to convert that for your own country. But we were paying $1,500 a year just for cyber insurance on top of building insurance, stock insurance, all the rest of it. I've seen a contract recently for $17,000 for the same thing 12 months later. Wow. And the thing we've discovered is it's because of the increase in payouts occurring from insurance firms. But you've got to be very careful with the terms of them. Quite often they actually have an excess per incident. And we actually had a situation where a person tried to get on a network, successfully got on a network, and then successfully encrypted, and it was treated as 3 separate incidences, which means 3 excesses were paid. So you do need to be very, very careful and think about your business stability, what you've got covering you basically, and protecting you.
Well, another thing that leads into is the fact that when you apply for cyber liability insurance, of course, there's a questionnaire, and anybody can figure out what the right answers are to those questions. The catch is, if in fact they have a breach or a security incident, it's not going to take the insurance company long to prove that they did not comply. They basically lied on the application, and all coverage will be denied. So there's actually a whole industry developing here, and presumably in Australia as well, around making sure that A, those questions are answered correctly, and B, that they are accurate. And so that's something that I have not heard actual numbers in terms of premium increases here in the States, but surely they're going to have to go up because there's been so many more breaches, so many more organizations are aware of the need for cyber insurance. And initially, the insurance company would pretty well pay the claims, assuming that everything was on the up and up. But after getting burned a few times, I'm sure they're much more careful about examining a claim before it's paid.
Look, not only that, but let's talk about another trend. Let's talk about something, and you may not be seeing this over there, but here in Australia, we're seeing a lot of this, where you go to your inbox and you've received an invoice attached as a PDF for a Word file that you are expecting. It's not a virus, no. It is actually really a PDF. It doesn't have any malicious, let's say, digital content. However, what you haven't picked up on is that the logo on that invoice is a little grainy, or there's something about the invoice that's not quite right, and they've just announced they've changed their banking details. We are seeing a massive increase in legitimate looking invoices going to customers who are expecting that invoice for large dollar amounts placed in their inboxes. A lot of this has come through from phishing. Someone has figured out usernames and passwords, gotten into cloud-based email systems, and planted either an invoice in that mailbox or used that mailbox to look through the sent items, work out who they've sent mail to, edited the sent items, and then resent it to them, asking for more money. Most recently, we had one for a $19,000 houseboat. Now, here in South Australia, we're blessed with the River Murray. Fantastic river, houseboats on it, things like that. I had a client who did actually purchase a houseboat. The invoice for that houseboat had kind of moved down their inbox a little bit, and the most recent invoice to pop into the inbox was a fake one. And they had to look at it, and it didn't quite look right, but they paid it anyway. They didn't realize until they went to pick the houseboat up that they hadn't been paid. And of course, the money's gone. So not only are we seeing ransomware, but we're seeing a lot of psychological, a lot of social engineering, a lot of trickery going on here in Australia. And I know that the US and Australia, that we are a little bit more well off than some countries. So therefore we're targets. And it doesn't matter how little money you think you've got, somebody else still wants that money, and they find a way to get it. So we are seeing here in Australia a lot of increasing phishing leading to fake Office 365 logons or Dropbox logons or things like that. And then with that, when somebody has made a mistake with their username and password, a lot of follow-up invoices that are actually fake. I've seen one as high as $300,000 for a textile shipment from Singapore to Australia. And the suspicion on that one was the person misspelt their own name. And of course, that came up that something's not right here. Looked into it and then found out that the email had actually been spoofed. It had the wrong details in the header of the email. It never actually came from that textile factory, and we managed to stop the payment of $300,000. So these are big ticket items, and of course, just as bad as ransomware because they gut your bank account real quick. I don't know, are you seeing something like that over there?
Not exactly like that, but very similar. The most common example here, when a house is bought and sold, normally it's the title company that does all the paperwork, and they're the intermediary. And so it's very common for a buyer to get a fake email from what appears to be the title company saying you're scheduled for your closing at such and such date and time, but the banking details have changed. Use this new routing and transit number and account number. And there you're talking again hundreds of thousands of dollars. And it's gotten to the point, it was so common that every title company I know of in the US now has a standard piece on their email stationery saying, do not accept any change in these terms or routing. If you see anything that requests any change, call your representative and call from the number that you have, not from clicking any link that may be in the email. So it's extremely common, and I shake my head every time I hear it. Of course, you and I, being in the cybersecurity business, it's just who could possibly fall for that? But normal people that don't understand the risk, and face it, how often does somebody buy or sell a house or even a houseboat? It's something that maybe do a few times in a lifetime, and the criminals do it multiple times per day, or at least they intercept those conversations and redirect the funds. And as you say, in just about every case, once it happens, the funds are gone. So, and
That's
again,
right.
in a lot of cases, it's their life savings or their proceeds from selling their previous home. They're moving up, and everything looks good. And it's a sad situation.
Yeah, and you have to understand what motivates these people. Well, let's say that 1 in 100 actually pays the $300,000. That's a payday to pay for the next year or two for these guys.
Yeah.
They only need 1 person in 100 to fall for it, because they send out thousands of emails, they hack thousands of accounts. You could even say more than 1,000. I don't know. I don't have the statistics, but it is a scattergun approach. But everybody's a target with this kind of thing. We all need to concentrate on making sure we know what we're putting our details into, we know what we're paying, we know who we're dealing with. There's so many other ways to get money out of us. But you seeing anything else over there, Ken? Anything else dramatic that's happening?
Well, just to wrap up on this one briefly, one thing that I think makes the this type of what's known as the CEO fraud or business email compromise so insidious is the fact that you've got, well, again, people that are so susceptible to it, but it's also a much more sophisticated attack than just a spray and pray, because before something like that happens, the bad guy has been in there monitoring that traffic and seeing that there is a transaction going on. And that's where you get into the hundreds or thousands that may produce 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 prospects. And then that in turn has a very high likelihood of being successful. So it's a multi-stage approach that doesn't happen just with one transaction. It's something they've been monitoring and watching. And in a lot of cases, there have been multiple correspondences back and forth with the criminals watching and then not swooping in until the actual date of the closing or the day before. And so there may have been dozens of communications, and so they know exactly who the people are, what the dollar amount is, what the date, location, time of the closing is. And so it has taken them more time. It is more of a focused, absolutely a spear phishing type attack that might have started off with a spray and pray, but before it has unfolded completely, it's a fairly labor-intensive effort for them. Well, fairly labor-intensive, meaning maybe they put 10 or 15 or 20 minutes into it for a $100,000 payoff, which is a pretty good hourly rate, more than I made for the last hour I spent. But it's, once again, they keep getting more creative in the ways that they accomplish things. Although, to be fair, that is not really a malware attack. That's purely social engineering. And so there's no malware involved, other than whatever it might have taken to make the penetration in the first place. But there again, that might not have been malware. It might have been just plain old-fashioned hacking. So
absolutely. One of the things I'm seeing that's very common, no matter what it might be ransomware, malware, or spear phishing, things like that, is that these hackers are on your systems a lot longer than you think. You might have a ransomware that's popped up on your screen and is encrypted, but they may have been on there weeks earlier. And as Ken said, they could have been siphoning off your data, or they could have been scurrying around the network and making sure that your previous backups are not recoverable. They could have been doing anything on the network. It's the same with, I'm going to call them actually I can't call them this because it's an Australian thing. I was going to say a particular banking term, but with payments and things like that, they could have been sitting in your mailbox for weeks, just learning your lingo, learning who you talk to, learning your style of writing, capturing your email signature, or maybe your supplier's email signature, trying to get into their systems as well, using your machine and your details to launch an attack against your supplier so they can get into your supplier and then send you back an invoice. They are in your systems for quite some time, and a lot of this can be automated. So a lot of it is light touch. So therefore, they've got lots of them all happening at exactly the same time, hoping one will pay off. So you need to be aware of that. You need to make sure, like we said before, that you've got data leak preventions in place, that you're monitoring your data flow. You got to make sure you've got your insurances in place, make sure that you've got backups that don't go back just a week, make sure they go back further than that. If you've got cloud backups, make sure you've got retention going back quite a while and recoverable versions going back quite some time. You want to make sure you've got the best chance of keeping your business running, because at the end of the day, everybody watching this pretty much has a business. We all need it to run. We all have customers. Those customers can only pay you if they can have money to pay you. And of course, they don't want to be paying that money out to the nasty guys, really. But look, I think that covers off quite a lot for this session. And without Harry here, I think we got a little technical, but hey, that's cool. It's always a breath of fresh air. But look, I think our time's almost up. And I think I need to sign off from Australia. And I think we need to arrange a time to do this again. And if you like this type of content, get back to Harry, let him know that you enjoyed this and you want to know more. And of course, SMB Nation, got to say it, got to promote it. There we go.
You bet. Well, Michael, thank you. And I trust that Harry will appreciate what we did without him and this won't end up on the cutting room floor. But it's been a useful conversation. I always enjoy hearing that great Aussie accent. And one of these days, I hope to get back down there once you open the country back up and things settle down a little bit.